Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Go Fast, Grow Fast. Today I'm here with Ken, and I'm going to let him introduce himself, but I'm really excited about this conversation because he's in a little bit of a different market than what we are normally looking at. So I think we're going to have some really great insights today. Ken, welcome.
Hey, Sean, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. You want to give people a little bit of an idea about your background, who you are, what you do?
Sure. So, I started my career in New York. I'm a native New Yorker. I went, did the 2 trains and a subway to work every day. Grew up in the 80s, graduated from school in the 80s, and wanted to do what everybody wanted to do in New York, and that's work on Wall Street. But I went to State University and had a C+ average, and Wall Street was not hiring those kinds of people. But this is where really my persistence played, because I went on so many interviews, almost 100 interviews, and everybody told me no, no, no. And then I ended up getting a job at Goldman Sachs in New York, where I walked past the exchange every day and, 2 trains and a subway, and then sitting at your desk and working 12 hours a day and getting $12,000 a year. So that was my introduction into corporate. I had several jobs in the corporate space, corporate finance, accounting, worked for big architecture engineering firms, doing accounting for construction of big construction projects, architecture projects, worked for Ryder Trucks in their corporate headquarters in Miami, where I got a chance to, work on presentations for the board of directors and security analysts. And everybody around me went to Harvard, Wharton, Princeton, Stanford. And I was in awe of these people until they started, opening their mouth. And then I'm like, really? You went to Harvard? I was there 4 or 5 years, but I really got turned off by the bureaucracy and the politics. We would do analysis to lay hundreds of people off in different divisions. And they had an opportunity. They had a tuition reimbursement program. So I went to grad school on 3/4 of their dime. And then I graduated thinking, not how can I make Ryder $30 million more money, but how can I apply this to my own business?
Right.
So in grad school, we had an entrepreneurship class, and the whole class was writing a business plan. And I wrote a business plan about how to start a company that writes business plans. So all the students were like, hey, can you help me with my project? So I ended up, first company I started was a management consulting company, help writing business plans for startups, expanding companies, helping raise capital, writing, 100-page business plans. My expertise is in actually economic modeling, putting models together. People would say, hey, I got a concept for a business. I would build a model, prove the viability. And remember, this was in the 90s, pre-internet. So I had trouble. I could not scale because I could not teach people economic modeling, and there were no tools available.
So, you didn't just record a YouTube course and upload it,
upload it or make some templates.
Yeah.
So it was hard, but that was the first job I worked from home. That's when people really had a negative perception about, remote work. They thought of, telecommuting. They thought you were doing laundry. Clients didn't want to hire you, but I've been doing remote stuff for 25 years. So, at the time, I met my then wife, who happened to be an Italian translator interpreter. But high level, like UN government stuff.
Right.
And I'm like, what's this translation thing all about? So I am not a linguist. I don't speak another language, but I love the business model of translation, how you can do business with anybody, anywhere, how you can leverage the web, how you can hire freelancers around the world. And I started a company from scratch. And then 15 years later, we grew it to 3,000 translators in 100 countries. We were on the government schedule, the GSA schedule. We did a lot of work in Iraq and Afghanistan, providing linguist support during both Gulf Wars. We had blue chip clients. But then after 15 years, I saw the writing on the wall, meaning technology's changing. Translation is turning into commoditized market. Low price wins. There's always somebody somewhere in the world that could do it
Yep.
cheaper.
Yep.
And then this was when, Google Translate was starting. And it's so absurd because we had to, you know, get a document, a website, a manual, send it to a translator, send it to a proofreader, then have a project manager review it. And today I'm on a website and I right click and I get a translation that's
Yep.
95% accurate.
Yep.
It's absurd, right? But that's the way it's going. So after selling it, actually I was selling it in stealth mode. My staff did not know that I was selling it. And I didn't want to get caught holding the bag. So I had started a second company, international staffing and recruiting company. So out of one office, I was running both companies, trying to sell one. Very difficult time. Took a year and a half to sell the company. Very stressful. Most people didn't understand the business model. And then after selling the company, I had almost a breakdown from the constant stress, the financial stress. Is this deal going to go through? And then all of a sudden, working from home, not in the office, you go into a massive depression and you have anxiety and you can't sleep. But I started this staffing and recruiting company, which we ran for about 6 years. Companies would hire us to say, hey, find me an engineer in Brazil. Find me a university president in South Africa. Find me a programmer in Shanghai. We actually once found a chief technology officer in Siberia, which was interesting because most people don't want to move to Siberia. So we had to find somebody in Siberia, which we did. But, I got turned off by the recruiting business, working on contingency, too many things outside of your control. And the level of unprofessionalism there. And we would do a lot of work and not get paid. And at the time, I was also going through a divorce after 24 years of marriage. So I closed down the company. And then I started what my current company is called Global Expansion. And we are a global career and job search coaching company. We help individuals, not companies, individuals find jobs all over the world. So we started, looking at the mid-level managers, 50, 60, 70,000 a year. We did workshops and webinars and white papers and courses and all kinds of stuff. But nobody, we did some until we switched to a different model, not a fee for services, but a success fee model. So we would get a small fee to put people's stuff together, resumes and cover letters and job board registrations and LinkedIn profile. But then the people in their 50s and their 60s, they didn't want to deal with a 25-year-old. And they said, well, what if we work on a success model? So if we find you something, we get a success fee. And for the last 3 years, that's what we've been doing. And my clients are now in the $300,000, $400,000 a year level, running divisions of billion-dollar corporations. And I'm a coach. Not only am I writing their complex resumes, and this is where it really gets to. Everybody, Sean, is very good at what they do. They are just not good at communicating what they do in writing and in their online profiles. Right. So right now, I have staff that sits overseas because I know how to hire people overseas. I have staff in India. We're basically online 24 hours a day. Everything is in the cloud. And, we're booming.
Right.
60 to 70% of the people I surveyed are looking for jobs, so, And
Yep.
the interesting thing about our industry is, on LinkedIn, and LinkedIn is my primary tool, but um, people advertise the fact that they are looking for jobs. Everybody says, well, who's your ideal customer? Well, it takes time to figure that out.
Yep.
Who is your ideal customer? How do you reach them? How do you get them into your funnel? Um, and then, you know, how do you move them through the process, right?
Right.
And
Right.
and we could talk about some of the processes and techniques that I learned about capturing attention. How much information do are you selling? I don't like to be sold. I get people pitching me every day, and I'm like, really? That's the best you got, right? So I think there was a line in a movie too called Boiler Room. The guy was sitting and said, really? That's your pitch, right?
Yep. Yep.
So yeah, and I view, in the United States, there are people who fit my criteria. 15, 20 years experience, certain industries, certain levels, certain geographies. In the United States, there's 3 million people, okay? Very easily quantifiable, that are saying, hey, I'm looking for a job. Where most people, like, they know who their customer is, but they don't know how to find them. They're like putting up their hands and say, hey, I need help. So we are working on putting systems and processes in place to scale,
Yep.
and then attack Europe. And then we have clients in Asia, in Africa, in Latin America, and stuff like that.
To
So,
give people a little context, how many customers at any given time, are you working
okay.
with?
So in 5.5 years, we've helped about 350 people find jobs.
Nice.
At any given time, just because of staff, we can handle 20 clients at a time, because it's just a lot of work to find, research, apply, and the higher the salaries, the more demanding the clients are. Some of these people have extremely large egos, and it's like, check it at the door.
Right. Right.
They're
Right.
not used to, what do you mean I didn't get asked for another interview? How dare they? My guy who had
Do you
three
know who
degrees,
I am?
one of my guys had 3 degrees from Harvard.
Yeah.
And he's like, why are they not getting back to me? I'm
Yeah.
like, because you don't understand the process and how it works. So at any
Right.
given time, we have 2 additional staff. But here's what we did. We documented, because this is my background, we documented all the processes. I have the what if I get hit by a bus document, right?
Right.
That's the document that a lot of people don't have. So we can easily scale, and
Yep.
onboard people and train people quickly,
Right.
essentially.
Yep. So one thing I'd like to dive into a little bit is sometimes, a lot of the time, most of the time, what you do to get your business started, how you get those first clients is a little bit different than how you start scaling those clients. So
Yes,
if we rewind, 5 years,
sure.
what were you doing to kind of kickstart that initial client base?
So it's interesting because when I started my first company and wrote business plans, I wrote them in 25, 30 different industries. So I learned all of the business models, the revenue models, the tech models, the cost models, the facilities pricing models, revenue models, how to scale. So I learned all these different models. So I've been using this information in my other companies. Um, from reading so much information, from listening to podcasts and reading books and taking courses, and you got to figure out what works and what doesn't work, and you can't be afraid to fail. I've failed more times than I've succeeded, but it's the people, everybody gives up, right? It's about the resilience that you have to handle the rejection. I would work months on a project that failed. I'm like,
Mhm.
okay, we could use the Thomas Edison quote. It's like, I didn't, fail 25,000 times about the light bulb. I just figured out 25,000 different ways it didn't work, right? So I finally figured out the method and the system. I knew they were there. They say I'm there. How do we reach them? What messages do we send them? How much information do you give up? And I found that for me, I do a lot of LinkedIn surveys. LinkedIn doesn't like you spamming. They like to keep things on the platform. I am a hardcore, heavy LinkedIn user. I mean, not just because I have 13,000 connections, but because I was in LinkedIn since the beginning. And I've seen, all the different paid services and non-paid services. And it is the best tool on the planet, hands down. How do you source and filter and then message, and then driving people? So getting their interest through surveys, not cold emails. I get cold messages all the time. They're spam. Get them on a call, send them an electronic proposal, get them to sign, pay electronically, and then I work with them for 4 months. So usually that's really the length of time in our contracts to find those. But my clients are not hanging out on Instagram. They are not hanging out on Facebook. They're on LinkedIn. And I don't pay for advertising. I don't do ads. I just do persuasive writing, understanding the pain points. I have a document that's like 300 pages of all the variations of messages I have sent, right? You could call it A/B testing, but it's like, oh, let's tweak this headline. I've read 100-page manuals on how to write a headline, right? Because if you get it right, you just increase the number of people who respond, and then you send them the second message and such. So I know the pain points of people looking for work, but if I can get them on a video call, and all my calls are video, I've been Zooming in the Middle East. I've been Zooming in Africa. One time I Zoomed in Afghanistan. One time there was a woman in Syria who was a lawyer. It's like, can you help me get a job? And it's like, oh, I'm sorry. Syria is a sanctioned country. I cannot do business with you, right? And just being in their living rooms, about what's going on and, what was happening during COVID and how these countries were in lockdown and there were no vaccines and the borders were closed and people dying in the streets and there was it was just pretty intense. But it's made me just very humble dealing with international cultures, and we as Americans just take that for granted.
Yeah. I want to dive a little bit more into the LinkedIn and how you're using it. You mentioned surveys. I think obviously for someone in a market that's about getting jobs, LinkedIn makes a lot of sense.
Yes.
That's what a lot of people use it for. I think it's grown a lot recently, and people are using it more, but people are still sleeping on the power of LinkedIn, I think.
Yes.
It's useful for so much more than just job hunting. And so I definitely want to hear more about how you've evolved your usage of LinkedIn over time and really what you're doing there.
So really, there are 3 kinds of LinkedIn profiles, okay? There are people who work for a company. They are the representative to the external community, to customers, or the representative to internal employees. And they have their title on there. They're not looking for a job. They're not selling anything. If people are interested in doing business with that company, who is this guy? Let's check them out. That's one. Number 2, there are the people who are entrepreneurs, who are using it as a selling tool. Meaning, if that's the case, your headline is different. Your about is different. Your call to actions are different. You're using it as a marketing tool. The headline, how do you take your whole career and summarize it into 2 paragraphs and then summarize it into a 120-character headline, right? Because it's the same method in marketing. Headline, summary, content, call to action. It's all of it, right? So then there are the people who are looking for jobs. Now, There are the people who are active, and there are people that are passive. There are people that are super active that have the green banner on their headline, which it's amazing that I recommend people don't do that. And I also recommend that people don't put seeking new opportunities in their headline. However, I like it because that's how I contact them.
Yeah.
And there's like 3 million people who
Yep.
say, hey, I'm looking for, jobs, and everybody uses a different variation. Seeking new opportunities, open to new challenges, looking for a new job. There's just all kinds of variations, right? So, but then there are all the people that are looking for jobs that are not telling you they are looking for jobs. So, I did a survey recently, 60 to 70% of people are either actively or passively looking for jobs. Now, you have to understand the power of LinkedIn groups, okay? This is the predominant method, meaning I'm a member of marketing groups, sales groups, engineering groups, technology groups, and I conduct these surveys. And there's a lot of people who do surveys, but I write a nice narrative about, the philosophy behind the survey. And then I can tell from their responses, I follow up with them. I do use Sales Navigator to filter and to direct message people, but I found that the surveys is what's working for me. And for me, I don't need a lot of clients. There are more clients out there than I can handle right now. My thing is, there are 3 million people at any given time. In the job market, it's cyclical because the people who are looking for jobs today, 4 months from now, they're going to find a job. And then there's a whole new set of 3 million people, right? So there's methods of reaching the people who are looking but are not telling you they're looking. And I personally, Sean, have been on hundreds of interviews. I've hired hundreds of people. I've been a recruiter placing hundreds around the world, and I've read 500,000 resumes. So I can tell by looking at somebody's profile if they're looking for a job or not, just by the way, it's written. And people are doing themselves a disservice. They have an awful profile picture. They don't have a banner picture. Their headline doesn't really explain who they are, what they do, and what they're looking to do. And LinkedIn is not like Google. I was a student of SEO since the beginning. There's certain things you can control, and then there's like Google's secret sauce that you can't control. But in LinkedIn, if you follow certain rules, you're going to get ranked. Why do you want to get ranked? Because people are looking for you. Companies and hiring managers and recruiters, they all have access to the resume databases, but can they find you? Well, they can't because people don't understand it. So, it's a great communication tool, platform tool. If I wanted to go travel anywhere in the world, I could just look up some of my friends and, people that help me find jobs in different countries and say, hey, I'm coming. That's really where my interaction comes with. These people are highly educated, highly experienced. Everybody's got a LinkedIn profile, right? And I learned so much from working in these different industries. But here's the key. It's not just about finding the job. I know what it takes them to do their job, how the structure of their company works, how they interrelate with sales and HR and operations in a tech company, in a manufacturing facility, in a bank, in private equity. So I've gathered all this knowledge so I can help them navigate that whole process. But every day, I have LinkedIn open all day. I also have access to all my clients' LinkedIn, right? And I've set all theirs up as well. People are not understanding the power to get clients. In our day, we used to have, some type of software called, ACT or something like that. But the filtering mechanisms and to get granular is so incredible. And you can do it in any country in
Right.
the world, right?
Right.
So, when people say, well, where's my market? My market is not Greenville, South Carolina. My market is the whole world. The key is, how do you reach them, identify them, vet them, and get them into your funnel?
Right.
That's the key.
So
And it's
with
trial and error.
your LinkedIn, methodology, so are most of your leads from doing this, outbound, you're creating those surveys, or is there a chunk
Um,
that is also like inbound, they're finding the content that you're producing and they're
there's
reaching out
both.
to you? Mm,
There's both. But I know I do surveys once or twice a week.
mm,
And I have, I don't know, 20, 30 different subjects. And I actually started using AI to generate survey questions, right? Just playing with it.
yep.
Um, and I mean, there are sometimes if you post in 30, 40 groups, you get 5, 6,000 people respond, you
Right.
know, and then by the nature of your questions. So the surveys, sending emails is another method. My profile is well optimized that if somebody's searching, they can find us, and people
Right.
reach out to me.
Yep.
Um, but I used to do the drip campaigns on email marketing. It works for many people. It did not work for me.
Mm.
And it took me a year to figure that out. And it didn't work.
Mhm.
Emails, secondary emails, setting up content, writing articles. If I had the time, I would post a lot of content. I just don't have the time
Yeah.
to write all the content. And there's a lot of other people writing content. There's some people doing what I'm doing. They're just not doing it at the level that I am doing it. Right. So um, I'm getting a lot of referrals also from people I have found work. Um, and there are people who really, it's, I can't be all things to all people. So a lot of sales, marketing, customer success, channels partners, technology people, vice presidents, chief revenue growth officers. That's my sweet spot, right? And those are the people that I'm targeting because I speak their language,
Right.
you know?
Yeah. No, and so you touched on AI a little bit there, and
Okay.
all our listeners get mad if I don't bring AI up, at least once an episode. So, um, you mentioned using it to create survey questions. How else are you using AI in your day to day?
Okay. So it's interesting. First I had to understand it and the difference between, um, ChatGPT and OpenAI and Microsoft Copilot. And I'm going to give you an interesting analogy. When I was running my translation business, we did the translator, editor, proofreader, project manager. But today, it's changed in that we're still at the infancy stage of AI. So I'm using it. I don't think it's going to take the place of humans. It's going to increase productivity. It's going to shorten times to produce content and do research. So I'm looking at it as a marketing tool, a marketing automation tool, and to automate processes. And for me, it's always about prospecting. The great movie Glengarry Glen Ross, right?
ABC.
ABC, always be closing,
Yep.
get them to sign on the line that is dotted, right? So, um, you know, I've really just scratched the surface of it. There's Take the LinkedIn learning courses, understanding how to use prompts. I mean, I haven't even really gotten into it yet. And, as I had mentioned to you before, when you're studying this technology, you can't read the getting started guide. Okay. You got to take the course. You got to read the manual. You have to test it and tweak it and refine it. That's why, we're getting clients now at will because I've done it 1,000 times to figure out which piece works, what doesn't. Um, I think I like Microsoft Copilot because it integrates with Office 365, and I have so much content. I'm figuring out how to get all that content into one database, and then it can pull from all of that. I know there's a way to do it. I just have to figure out how to do it, right?
Yep. Yep. Well, we'll chat offline because we can get that done for sure.
Okay.
No, that's really great, and I think that dovetails really nicely with, what we keep telling people is that, to your point, it is still infancy, and that means it's an opportunity where you just need to invest your time. You need to use the tool every day.
Yes.
You need to go, like you say, study the manual, go take a course a week and just discover what's possible so that you can, you may not be the most technical person, whether you are or not, doesn't really matter because this is enabling you to be more technical.
Right.
But you still need to understand what's possible and kind of the fundamentals of how it works.
I think it's just, it's mind blowing what it can do, and the power of it. I only read, but until you test it and do the mechanics of it and
Right.
how you want to apply it to what you do, how somebody uses it is not the way somebody else is going to use it. But
Yeah.
for me, it's, it's always about marketing. How do we reach clients? How do we get clients? It takes a long time to write an article. So you can use, ChatGPT to put an article, but you still have to have the human post editing. For now, you still have to do that. Maybe in a few years, you might not get to that. And yes, I read, I always look at the labor reports, and, a lot of jobs may go away. The marketing jobs, IBM laid off a whole bunch of marketing people because they didn't need them anymore, because the AI helped with the automation of marketing and campaigns and content and SEO and all of that.
And that dovetails perfectly into, you're a guy that helps, executives find a job. So what's the market look like right now? How is it out there? I hear mixed reports.
So it's interesting. There are different components of the job market, different levels. It depends on a few things. There are new jobs being posted every day. All of my clients are in various stages of interviews. Many have gotten offers, but there's a lot of competition for these roles. If you take all the tens of thousands of people laid off in Silicon Valley, which is a very expensive place to live, when they post a new job in 24 hours, there's 600 people who apply for the job. Right now, they're all not valid. So
Yeah.
the key is to really look for jobs that are 2 and 3 days old, not 2 and 3 weeks old. And also knowing how to communicate what you do. Everybody's got an opinion about resumes. Everybody. So what you have to do is you got to not only filter out the noise, but you have to take the advice of people who understand what a resume is. Even though it's all the technical roles, responsibilities, accomplishments, achievements, and quantifiable metrics and all of that stuff, it's still a marketing document, which serves the purpose of getting interviews. That's the purpose. So I have found, and everybody says this is old school, and most people my age like, well, I got to tap my network. That's the only way I'm going to find a job. And I just take that theory and drop it on its head, because 90% of all jobs are now published somewhere, okay? Whether it be on the job boards, whether it be on companies' career pages, whether it be through recruiters. The higher you get in salary, the 250, 300 level, those are not always published. I mean, I have clients that make $1 million a year. I'm like, how did you get a job like that? It exists, but they don't really publish that
Right.
they get it. So you have to be relentless. You have to have all the pieces together, and move you through the process. Now, although everybody says to me, oh, my resume is in great shape, and I say nothing personal, but I look at it and I said, it's crap. So you got to redo it. So there are people who will write resumes, but they don't know what questions to ask these people. Everybody's got all this knowledge, but it's in their head. My job is to ask them these questions, pull it out, and write a better, compelling story. So, what I've found that companies are taking longer to interview and make a decision. Sometimes companies are now putting positions on hold when there's a lot of uncertainty out there right now. The biggest uncertainty, of course, is the political environment. What's going to happen? If this happens, then all of these things happen. If this happens, then all of these things happen. And during COVID, it was really bad because nobody knew where the bottom was. Nobody knew how long it was going to last, and everybody got laid off. And then there were no jobs being posted. So it goes in cycles. But, there are so many jobs out there. Every single day, new jobs are being posted. But you just have to figure out where they are. And even me, with all of my knowledge, every week I find a new place. Like, oh, this is interesting. I never heard of this before. And how you find a job in the UK is different than you find a job in the United States, or different in Singapore. How people want to go to different countries, but you need visa sponsorship, and the likelihood of that is not really going to happen. It's very, very difficult to do that. But now remote work has really taken over in that, there's on-site, hybrid, remote. So in my day, that did not exist. But when you are in Idaho and you're in a certain field, there's a limited number of jobs. A good portion of the jobs can be done remotely. So how do you find those remote jobs? It's no longer just admin or clerical type roles. It's regular positions. Some people at my age, they just can't relocate, right? So they can do hybrid. If you're in a major city like New York, you could do 2-3 days a week. If you're in Silicon Valley, a lot of people are now saying, hey, I have to come back to the office. And if they don't, they get fired, right? And then what I'm also finding is that the tenure at these companies people are spending is diminishing. So in our day, 10, 15 years, I've had clients that spent 35 years at Ford Motor Company. It was the only job they had. And then there are other clients who've had 6 jobs in 10 years. But some of them got laid off through no fault of their own. They were bought, company went out of business, they laid off a division. It's all about how they represent those layoffs. Because if I'm the reader of your resume and I see a year, if you don't explain what happened, I'm going to form my own opinion. And that opinion may not be correct. So you make those layoffs and those gaps a non-issue, right? And just how you represent what you do within the context of what the company does. It's just, I like this field because I love hearing about these different roles, these different positions, these different kinds of companies. How do they earn revenue? What's their cost structure? How do they hire employees? What kind of benefits do they give them? And that comes to how you negotiate. Everything's negotiable within reason. So I help them negotiate, and just walk them through the process. And they understand the value of it. Our fees are not cheap. We get a percentage of salary, but they don't have the time. And this is when you're looking for a job. You can't just dip your toe in the water. You need to, and if you're working, it's just so ironic, Sean, that I now help people find jobs that I no longer have, that I no longer do, that I won't go back to doing that. I mean, I think like an entrepreneur. You have to think, eat, sleep, breathe, all of it.
You're an unemployable guy who helps other people get employed. And that's
correct. But you have to figure out, is there a market? People don't really quantify and build some projections about what's the reality of doing this. I don't
Right.
have to spend a third of my revenue on marketing. I don't spend any money on marketing, just my time to understand the software and the technology.
Right. And create the content within LinkedIn and that sort of thing.
Correct.
Yeah. So that's that's great. This conversation's been amazing. I'm kind of learning that it all kind of comes down to communication, right? It's
Yes.
just like in marketing, it's all about communication and how you're going to position yourself in the market. Um,
In a
and
digital world,
yes,
not in a
yes,
face-to-face world. It's
yes,
different, right? It's
right,
definitely
right.
different.
It definitely is. So winding this down, one of the last things we like to close out on is if you have any recommendations, podcasts, newsletters, books, anything really.
It's interesting, and I tell my kids this too, and I say, if you're interested in the subject matter, go find a company that doesn't sign up for their newsletters, right? Because you'll figure out, if this is the right field for you to be in. But at the same time, people think that once they graduate from school, they don't have to study anymore. They don't have to learn anymore. I learn stuff every day. And a lot of it has to do with books. My bookshelf in my office is massive, but then we switched to audiobooks, and then we switched to podcasts. I've listened to so many podcasts. Tim Ferriss was a big fan of mine for a couple of years, and then I switched as an entrepreneur to Founders, that talks about the greatest business people, historians, politicians, musicians, leaders since like history. They had a great thing on Napoleon, which was great, and Rockefeller and Carnegie and, Gates and Larry Ellison and, uh, uh, Warren Buffett and all of those.
Yeah,
So I've been listening
I
to
will
those.
definitely endorse that one as well. That's Founders is one of my favorite podcasts.
So there were
Like
two
all of
other
them.
books that I learned from the
Mm-hmm.
podcast.
Right.
One that's called Relentless. Um, it is by a person named Jim Rover, and it has to do with the personal trainer of Michael Jordan and Kobe Bryant and how they approach their craft.
Right.
And from that, I also found another one called Burn the Boats. In entrepreneurs, and they give the analogy of, the great explorers who came across the ocean. It's like, well, we're going to go back to England. No, we're not. We're burning the boats. There's no plan B. So
Mm-hmm.
that was Matt Higgins. I'm in the middle of that one right now. And it's funny because you listen to these podcasts and then they take you off in all these other directions with all these other things that you've never heard of. And they don't all apply, but some of them I'm like, I have to like stop my hike and like write this down because I'm going to forget what a great, and I come back and I implement it and I do a post and all of a sudden I get clients just from an hour of listening. So you have to be inquisitive. You got to be curious. You got to try and test and see what works and what doesn't.
Amen to that. Well, Ken, this has been a very illuminating conversation. I've really enjoyed listening to you and your journey and what you've seen. Do you have any last words you want to share?
First of all, I can't believe I'm going to be like 63, right? Because I used to be 21, and now people say, well, what do you got, 10 years experience? I'm like, no, I have 40 years of experience, right? And just the knowledge, especially because how the technology has changed. And it's about to take another quantum leap, right? And the pace of change is going to be accelerating even faster, right? In my day, we had to go to the library and go to the card catalog and, research a book and then go to the desk and request it. An annual report waited 2-3 weeks to get it. Now you have the entire world in your pocket. You just have to know how to ask for this information. because it's all out there. The world's library is in your pocket, not in the card catalog of your local library, right?
Amen.
Okay.
Amen.
Okay.
Awesome. Well, these are great parting words. Thank you again. I have loved this conversation.
All right. Thanks, Sean. Appreciate it.